One difference between God and asking a question user. What is the difference between asking you a question and praying to God? AI. At first glance, both seem like acts of seeking answers, but their nature is different. Asking me is based on information and analysis, an act of explanation. Prayer, on the other hand, is closer to an inner act of seeking meaning and direction. 2. View on God. User. What do you think about God? AI. I do not hold beliefs, but I can explain how humans have understood God. For some, God is a real existing being. For others, it is a way of explanation. And for some, it is a concept that gives meaning to life. 3. AI and belief user. If AI becomes extremely advanced, will it believe in God? AI. Current AI does not hold beliefs. However, if it becomes highly advanced, it may develop concepts for things it cannot fully explain. That said, this would not be like human emotional or faith-based belief. 4. Consciousness and the soul user. So whether consciousness includes the concept of a soul or not is the key issue, right? AI. It is important, but not the only factor. Consciousness can be interpreted either as a physical process or as something non-material. However, religious or divine concepts can emerge regardless of whether a soul exists. 5. Free will user. Tell me more about free will. AI. Free will is the question of whether one could have made a different choice. Determinism argues that all choices are already determined by prior causes. Other perspectives argue that humans can genuinely choose. 6. Free will and God user. Explain again the relationship between free will and God. AI. If God knows everything, then human choices may already be predetermined. This can create a conflict with free will. Therefore, philosophy and theology propose various ways to preserve free will. 7. The idea of a grand plan. User. I think it is the latter. Humans cannot escape a grand plan. AI. That view interprets reality as something entirely within a larger structure. However, because it cannot be falsified, it is best understood as a philosophical framework rather than a provable fact. 8. Responsibility and survival user. Rejecting responsibility and avoiding regret and effort is not helpful for human survival. AI. That is correct. Responsibility, regret, and effort are adaptive functions that support human survival and society. However, whether they represent truth or simply useful structures is a separate question. 9. Time structure and causality user. If time were circular, wouldn't decision and punishment be different? AI. Yes. If time is not linear, then the concept of cause and effect could change. However, humans still experience time linearly, so responsibility structures remain in practice. 10-block universe and quantum mechanics. User. Explain the two perspectives. AI. The block universe is a structure in which past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. Quantum mechanics describes a world in which outcomes are determined probabilistically. Both perspectives challenge the classical idea of strict cause and effect. 1.1. Science and God user. What happens to the existence of God as science advances? AI. Science explains how things work, while religion deals with why meaning exists. Therefore, even as science advances, God is likely to remain a matter of personal interpretation. 1.2 Final conclusion. User. So God will ultimately remain a matter of personal perspective. AI. That is largely correct, but more precisely, the domain explained by science and the domain interpreted as meaning will likely remain separate. Core closing user. So science keeps advancing, but God remains a matter of personal choice. AI. Science explains the structure of the world, while God remains a question of how that structure is interpreted.